seen a few videos recently of booktubers talking about 5 hard books that they have finished, and that got me thinking that I have never done a video on this topic, so I'm going to do that today. I It seems like every March and April there is booktube commentary on hard books, and of course it's a year-long thing. But I remember, I think 2 years ago in April, I did my first video on hard books. I think it was 10 hard books that I want to read, and that was a lot of fun. And I haven't exactly checked off many of the books that I talked about in that video, but hard books are, or hard or difficult books are a challenge and a journey, and we can attempt that journey and try to succeed, or we can hide and cower in fear. So I think it's better to at least try, even if you don't succeed. So we are going to talk about hard books now. And before I get into my list of 5, or I have 6 technically, but 5 hard books. Before we talk about that, of course, we need to define what a hard book is. And there are many scenarios, I think, where we can adjust the definition of what hard book is, in a general sense. And then, of course, for different individual human beings, different books will be hard, whether that's based on your reading level, your experience, your knowledge of certain subjects. The way I see things, we can divide how people label hard books into 3 categories. The first being a book is hard because of its length, it is long. The second being a book is hard because of the subject matter. The subject matter is difficult to get through. It can be traumatic or painful to read, whatever. But that would be the subject matter, which is number 2. And the third category for hard books, I think, is just the complexity of the text, whether that be the prose style or the understanding of the reader of what the author is trying to put down. And this might be for a variety of reasons. Usually the author is being intentionally a little obtuse, or they're hiding meaning behind many layers of metaphor and other things. So that is the third category, complexity. And today I'm only going to talk about books that fit into the third category of I thought they were complex or hard to understand. We're not going to talk about long books because for me, length is not an issue when it comes to books. If I like the book, I will read a very long book on that topic, or I will read that book. It can be difficult or not difficult. If I like it, I will try to finish it. And we are also not going to talk about books solely for their subject matter. Of course, on Traumatic Tomes, here we have the Traumatic Book Club, so I read a lot of books that are considered traumatic. So we're not going to talk about those. I do other videos on books that have difficult subject matters. So this list, only books that I found hard to read, whether I lacked the intelligence, or I didn't like or I couldn't understand the prose style well enough, or things like that. So enough with that 5-minute preamble. We're going to get into the list now, and I have an honorable mention. I did not finish this first book, so that's why it's not in the list of 5. But I did find it difficult, and that would be the 14th century classic, The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. Now, the main reason I found The Canterbury Tales difficult was the language. This is the Penguin Classic edition, translated by Neville Coghill. I'm not sure when he translated it. probably the mid 20th century. But of course, Geoffrey Chaucer in the 14th century wrote in Middle English, which is still readable by modern times, but it it's readable compared to Old English, where Old English is not readable per se without knowing Old English. But Chaucer's Middle English, you can get along with, I don't know what percentage, but most of it by knowing modern English. And of course, it's all different, but like if you sound it out, it might jive for you. But the Neville Coghill modern verse translation, it's still verse, and for me, reading it with my eyeballs, the Canterbury Tales prose style, it was not flowing the way I thought a book should flow. Now, it's rhymed verse, so when I read it out loud to myself, of course in my slow speaking cadence, which I cannot change. Maybe I could change it, but never mind. When I read it aloud, it sounded great. I liked the rhythm, but I didn't want to spend 500 pages reading this book aloud. I'm not really an auditory person, and I didn't want to spend that much time, because that would take forever, reading the entire thing aloud. Of course, I wanted to read with my eyes, because I'm an eyeball reader. But it just wasn't working for me, and I decided to DNF it. So Canterbury Tales is a book that I found difficult, and I admit that. And I look forward to trying it again. Maybe this year, I don't know. We'll see. But I am not finished with you, Jeffrey. Okay, so that was book 6, honorable mention. Book number 5. These are not ranked in any order, actually. But I always talk about this book, so you have to endure more of my commentary. But a book that is very difficult to read is Terra Nostra by Carlos Fuentes. This is a 1975 work of historical fiction / magical realism. It follows a story of Philip II of Spain, the King of Spain, and his building of the great cathedral El Escorial in Spain, and the Spanish world and the Spanish conquest of the New World. But it's a very ethereal and passionate book. Carlos Fuentes, he has in this book at least, he has a arcane and just rapturous style of prose that is both awe-inspiring and really confusing at times. This book is 891 pages, and it does not let up in a single page. Shout out to Margaret Sayers Pedden, the translator of this book from Spanish. Margaret knocked it out of the park. I can't read the original, but I'm pretty sure this is one of the best translations that I've ever read for translated literature. Not that I'm not that well read and translated, but I like Pedden. I like Edith Grossman a lot too. But I will read you a couple passages just from this book to show you the how the prose works, because these might not be the most confusing passages, and they might not be the longest, but there are the paragraph construction and the sentence construction will be difficult for a lot of readers who are not used to Carlos Fuentes. And some may say that this book is overwritten. I could see that, and I've seen that in a few other Fuentes books where I was like, hey, this is overwritten and I don't like it. But here I can maybe admit it's overwritten and I love it. So Just depends, I guess. First, we'll do the first paragraph from the first chapter. Flesh, spheres, gray eyes beside the sign. Incredible, the first animal that dreamed of another animal. Monstrous, the first vertebrate that succeeded in standing on 2 feet and thus spread terror among the beasts still normally and happily crawling close to the ground through the slime of creation. Astounding, the first telephone call, the first boiling water, the first song, the first loincloth. So that's the first paragraph. And then, let's see. Here's a sentence from page 65 after Philip II, El Felipe Senor, his army has conquered a city in the Netherlands, and they're entering the city victorious. And here from page 65, black, brilliant, turbid, liquid memory of the present. The heretics were well supplied with stores inside the walled city built upon a small hillock and encircled by a deep moat. It was additionally protected by its swampy lakes, as the heretics were protected by the inciting Brabantine and Batavian dukes who set their temporal authorities against the divine authority of Rome, claiming Caesar's portion for themselves instead of God. In this way they freed themselves from the payment of tithes, kept in their own coffers all proceeds from the sale of indulgences, and favored the merchants and usurers of the grey Nordic ports. And 2, El Señor smiled bitterly. The heretics, akin to the Waldensian austerity and the Catharistic sin, but who now called themselves Adamites, had ended up in the service of the sins they claimed to combat: greed and riches and power. So that was one sentence, and there's a lot of not extreme references, but references that are intellectual references to things of the time period that most people wouldn't know, and that I didn't know either. So a very difficult text, but if you like weird Latin American 20th century literature and you think you might be up for this, I promise you'll have a great time with Terra Nostra by Carlos Fuentes. And on a similar note to the passage I just read of confusing religious sects, we have my book number 4 for Hardest Books I've Ever Read, with Umberto Eco's Name of the Rose. Name of the Rose. This book, what is it, from 81? 1981? 1980. It is a historical fiction, like Terra Nostra, set in the 14th century. I believe it's 1327. And the main plot is a murder mystery where William of Baskerville, a Benedictine monk, I believe, and his assistant, his scribe Adzo, arrive at this abbey in Italy where there's a bunch of monks. And sorry, my neighbors the kids are screeching. But the one by one, in a series of weird and mystical ways, the monks of this abbey are being killed off, and it's up to William and Adzo to try and figure out the manner and the murderer and the perpetrator of the murders. And all along this journey, there's a lot of philosophical diatribes and discussions, and there's a secret within the library of the abbey, and there's a ton of complicated references to ancient and contemporary being 14th century works of literature. There's a hinging plot point kind of on a lost book of Aristotle. What else is confusing? There's a ton of references to the 14th century kind of like schisms within the Catholic Church between different monastic groups, like the Benedictines, the Franciscans, the Dulcinians. There's different heresies, and you have to figure out what each group means. And then there's agents of the Pope and inquisitions. And throughout this, Umberto Eco does not help out the reader at all. There's a lot of, I found a lot of of course the references, but the writing and the use of different languages. Eco sometimes goes like sentences and sentences in Latin or other languages. And even for somebody who studied Latin in school, I would say I can't go on like a sentence for sentence basis with you. I could recognize some words, but I can't like just read Latin. And there's no like notes or anything on that. But I know some people who have commented on prior videos of mine said this was not hard for them. It was hard for me, so I'm putting it on this list. I'm not done with it. I would love to revisit it after maybe I've brushed up on the 14th century. But yeah, this is a hard book for me. Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. Okay, book number 3 in my hardest books, not ordered. We have The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyers. Now, this book is the transcription of a series of interviews that Bill Moyers did with Joseph Campbell. Bill Moyers is a television host or something. Joseph Campbell, a famous mythologist, a famous author. I don't know exactly how to categorize him. But they did these television interviews for PBS, and there was a show. But this book, Power of Myth, documents those interviews. And Moyers and Campbell talk about a ton of different subjects. They talk about the importance of myth, some of the main archetypes of mythology, how there are some differences but many similarities between all these seemingly disconnected societies and civilizations, and how there's lots of flood myths or many myths. We have an ice cream truck out here now. That's I can't catch a break right now. Okay, but lots of myths are derived from or pretty much all myth is like derived from the fear of death, and it's all about eating people, like eating their life force or consuming. So I found this difficult because one, Campbell is a mythological encyclopedia, and he can pull out whatever, or he could pull out any reference to any myth from any culture at any time. And there were so many myths in here that Campbell and Moyers talk about that I was like, I've never even heard of this society before, in like the Philippines or something, this like ancient civilization. So I felt underread in myth first, and secondly, combined with that, I felt that a lot of their conversations were too high level for me to really latch on to. The conversations were entertaining and intellectual, but I couldn't ground it in my own learning. So for that reason, I kind of like I read diligently through like the first 2/3 of this, I think, or something, but by the end I was kind of worn out, and I didn't speed read through it, but I just kind of read the rest of it without trying to think as much, just seeing what was said and noting interesting parts, but I wasn't trying to ensnare the mythos of the book within me, because I knew it was too much for me, and I was like, oh, I have to come back later on this book. So, The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyers defeated me, but I've collected a ton of world mythology that I'm trying to work through slowly. So definitely want to come back to this one. I am ready. Power of Myth. Okay. This next book I do not have with me, but I will show it on the screen right here. That's The Problems of Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. Yeah, you can't tell by the picture, but it's a very short book. I read the Dover Thrift edition, I believe. But it's a 1912 philosophy work, of course. And the reason I read it was because on the back cover, it was touted as an accessible introduction to the field of philosophy. And I can tell you it was not accessible, it was not an introduction, it was not easy. Bertrand Russell writes like a philosopher, and if you've read any philosophy, you know that most philosophers either can't write well or they cannot teach people well who don't know what they're talking about. They're less so like it's not pop philosophy, and I think for an introduction to a field, there's nothing better than just I won't say a light pop philosophy book, but like a book for a popular audience. I think should be easier by definition. But this was not. I read it a few years ago, but I distinctly remember him trying, or in the first couple chapters, explaining like whether or not a chair exists, like a chair right in front of you. And as soon as he started going into that, I was immediately lost. And it continued for whatever the 120 pages of the book. It didn't get any easier. I think he started off referencing like the philosopher Berkeley, who is mentioned like in association with David Hume, and John Locke. And I think he went into some Descartes. But that was one of the hardest texts to understand that I have ever read. And it was just frustrating because I thought it was going to be an introductory work, and it wasn't. So I don't even know if I'm going to return to that one. That's a book that turned me off of philosophy a little. So I don't read much philosophy to begin with, but that was difficult, and I that was probably the hardest book on this list for me to finish. And by the end, it was like my brain hurt when I was finishing it. So, yeah, The Problems of Philosophy, probably the hardest book I've ever completed. I understood basically nothing. And mind you, there are a lot of hard books that I have read, and I usually DNF. I don't finish these hard books because either I don't like it, and so if I don't like it and it's hard, I don't deem it worth the effort, or I do like it and it's hard, and I'm like, I should wait and brush up on other things and come back later. I usually don't stick it out unless I think it's worth it. And in the Problems of Philosophy, I deemed it worth it because it was short. it was like less than 150 pages. So I was like, I'll see what he says to the end and see if it gets any more, if there's any more clarity in the text, which there wasn't, but that's okay. And here we go. Number one on my list, but it's not ordered, of course, is, let's see, A History of the Modern World by R.R. Palmer and Joel Colton. I don't have a dust cover. Hang on. There we go. This is the second edition from 1960, I believe. But the first edition came out in the 50s. And this is basically a history of Europe in the last 500 years-ish. It begins at the rise of Europe in like Greece and Rome, and it also covers the Middle Ages. The second chapter is the Revolution in the Christian Church, 1300 to 1560. But after that, we get 1560 onwards to World War II. And the reason I have put this in the difficult book category is just because it's a history book, and it is so expansive and high level that it is really difficult if you're not like a European scholar, European history scholar, which I'm not a scholar. I have an avid interest in European history, but I don't know everything in this book, and I don't know most things in this book. And so it was such a, I had such a difficult time trying to connect the dots between what was happening in the Netherlands at a certain time, what was happening in France or England or Italy, and where was everyone's ships after they started going west and east. So that's why I think this book was difficult, but I really enjoyed this. There were some neat pictures in here as well. Not many, but yeah, so I really liked this book, History of the Modern World. And I took copious notes. I have a whole notebook full of it. But it was difficult. It took me, I didn't finish this book. I read what I wanted to from it. But even so, I read the first 400-ish pages, or 450, like half the book. And it took me 3 or 4 months. And I would read this often. I'd go to the coffee shop and try to knock out like 10, 15 pages. And it would take a long time. There were so many things that I didn't know that I had to pause and either think about or pause to mark down for later. So like, this whole paragraph hinges on a certain historical topic that I've never heard of. So yeah, just a totally wide and expansive history that is difficult for its scope. That really fun read. I'm not sure how many more editions there are. This kind of reads like a history textbook, as opposed to more of a narrative history. It's not a narrative history. But if you are a history fan or a Historathon person, you might like History of the Modern World. Anyways, thanks for watching. Have you read any of these books that I thought were hard? And did you think they were hard, or am I just an idiot? Yeah, so that's it for now. I will talk to you guys later.